The bright morning sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows of Hope Community Church, casting colorful patterns across the polished wooden floor. Jessica Wilson had spent weeks gathering the courage to come here today. At 29, she finally had something to look forward to after years of struggling alone. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched a small folder containing wedding invitation samples, venue details, and a list of questions about the ceremony. Jessica checked her watch, 10:15 a.m. She was 15 minutes early for her appointment with Pastor Richards. Taking a deep breath, she smoothed down her navy blue skirt and adjusted her cream blouse. She wanted to make a good impression. This church wasn't where she normally attended services, but it was where her fiancé Michael had grown up, where his parents had married 40 years ago, and where his sister had celebrated her wedding just last summer. It meant everything to Michael to continue the family tradition. "Miss Wilson?" A deep voice interrupted her thoughts. Pastor Richard stood in the doorway of his office, a tall man with silver-flecked hair and wire-rimmed glasses. "Please, come in." Jessica smiled and followed him inside. The office was modest but warm, with bookshelves lining the walls and family photos displayed on the desk. She sat in the chair he offered, placing her folder on her lap. "So, Michael tells me you're planning a September wedding," Pastor Richards began, his tone friendly as he settled into his chair. "Yes, September 18th, Jessica replied. "We've already reserved the reception venue, but Michael really hopes we can have the ceremony here. Michael Chen has been part of our congregation since he was a boy. Wonderful family." Pastor Richards nodded. "Now tell me a bit about yourself. I don't believe I've seen you at our services before." Jessica explained that she'd grown up in a different denomination but had been attending services with Michael occasionally over the past year. She talked about her job as a kindergarten teacher, how she and Michael had met at a mutual friend's birthday party 2 years ago, and how he had proposed on Christmas Eve. "And you have a child?" Pastor Richards asked, glancing down at some notes on his desk. Jessica's face brightened. "Yes, my daughter Lily. She's 6, going on 16 sometimes." She laughed. "She's so excited about the wedding. She adores Michael. She's already calling him Dad, even though we've told her it's okay to wait until she's ready." Something shifted in Pastor Richard's expression. His smile remained, but his eyes cooled noticeably. "And Lily's father? Is he involved in her life?" Jessica's own smile faltered. "No, Thomas left when I was 4 months pregnant. He struggled with addiction issues and couldn't handle the responsibility. We haven't heard from him in years." She hesitated before adding, "Michael has been more of a father to Lily in 2 years than Thomas was in her entire life." Pastor Richards nodded slowly, his fingers forming a steeple under his chin. "I see. Well, Miss Wilson, I appreciate your honesty. However, I need to inform you about certain church policies." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Jessica felt a knot forming in her stomach. "What policies?" she asked quietly. "Our church has strict guidelines regarding marriage ceremonies," Pastor Richards explained, his voice taking on a formal tone. "We believe in upholding traditional family values. Unfortunately, we don't perform wedding ceremonies for unwed mothers. It's about the example we set for our congregation, you understand." Jessica stared at him, certain she had misheard. "I'm sorry. What?" "We cannot offer our church as a venue for your wedding because you have a child out of wedlock," he stated more plainly. "It's not personal. It's simply our policy." The folder slipped from Jessica's fingers, scattering invitation samples across the floor. She barely noticed. "But that doesn't make sense," she stammered. "Michael's sister Diane is divorced and remarried, and you performed her ceremony right here last year." Pastor Richards cleared his throat uncomfortably. "That situation was different." "How? How is it different?" Jessica's voice rose slightly as confusion gave way to hurt. "Diane was married in a church for her first marriage. The circumstances were more in line with our values." The implication hung in the air between them. Jessica felt heat rising to her cheeks, not from embarrassment, but from anger. "So because I was never married to my daughter's father, I'm somehow less worthy of getting married here?" Even though I've raised her alone for 6 years, even though I've done everything possible to give her a good life, Pastor Richards sighed. Miss Wilson, please understand. Our policies aren't about judging your worth as a person. They're about maintaining the standards our church community expects. Jessica bent down to gather her scattered papers, her hands shaking so badly now that she could barely grasp them. A photo of Lily slipped from between the invitation samples, her school picture, gap-toothed smile beaming up from the glossy paper. Jessica stared at her daughter's innocent face and felt tears threatening to spill. I need to go, she whispered, stuffing everything haphazardly back into the folder. Miss Wilson, there are other churches that might be more accommodating to your situation, Pastor Richards offered, standing as she rose from her chair. I'd be happy to provide some recommendations. Jessica couldn't bring herself to look at him. No, thank you, she managed to say, her voice thick with emotion. Michael's family has attended this church for generations. It was important to him. To continue that tradition, I guess we'll have to break the news to his parents that their son isn't welcome to marry here because of who I am. Now, that's not entirely fair, Pastor Richards began, but Jessica was already walking toward the door. Life isn't fair, Pastor, she said quietly. I thought church was supposed to be different. The morning sunlight that had seemed so beautiful earlier now felt harsh and exposing as Jessica hurried across the parking lot. Once inside her car, the tears she'd been holding back finally broke free. She leaned her forehead against the steering wheel and sobbed, all the joy she'd felt about wedding planning evaporating in an instant. With trembling fingers, she pulled out her phone and dialed Michael's number. He answered on the second ring, his voice cheerful. Hey, how did it go with Pastor Richards? Did you set a date for the ceremony? Jessica tried to speak but could only manage a choked sob. Jess? What's wrong? What happened? Michael's tone immediately shifted to concern. They won't let us get married there, she finally managed to say. Because I'm a single mom. Because I had Lily without being married. There was a moment of stunned silence before Michael's voice came through the phone again, tight with barely controlled anger. He said, what? Are you serious right now? He said it's their policy, something about upholding traditional values. Jessica wiped at her tears with the back of her hand. Michael, I'm so sorry. I know how much it meant to you to get married there. Don't you dare apologize, Michael cut in firmly. You have nothing to be sorry for. Nothing. This is unbelievable. I've been going to that church my whole life. Jessica could hear him taking deep breaths, trying to calm himself. Where are you now? He asked after a moment. Still, in the parking lot. Okay. Don't drive when you're upset. I'm leaving work right now. I'll be there in 20 minutes and we'll figure this out together, okay? Jessica nodded, then remembered he couldn't see her. Okay. And Jess? I love you and Lily more than any building or tradition. Remember that. As Jessica ended the call, she caught sight of her reflection in the rearview mirror, eyes red, mascara smudged, cheeks blotchy from crying. 3 months before what was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, and here she was being judged for a past she couldn't change. What hurt most wasn't just the rejection, it was knowing that Thomas, who had chosen to abandon his own child, somehow faced less judgment than she did for staying and raising their daughter alone. Life really wasn't fair. Jessica sat at her kitchen table that evening, staring at her laptop screen. Michael had gone to put Lily to bed with an extra story after the difficult day they'd had. The house was quiet except for the soft ticking of the wall clock and the occasional car passing by outside. She hadn't meant to start anything. Really, she hadn't. All she wanted was some advice. After crying her eyes out in the church parking lot and then spending an hour with Michael trying to process what had happened, Jessica had come home feeling lost. They needed a new venue with only 3 months, until the wedding date. Most places were booked a year in advance. The stress of it all made her head pound, so she'd done what many people do these days when looking for recommendations. She'd posted in the local community Facebook group. Can anyone suggest wedding venues available for September 18th? Our original plans fell through today when Hope Community Church refused to marry us because I'm a single mom. Looking for somewhere welcoming that can accommodate about 100 guests. Thanks in advance." She'd added a small sad face emoji at the end and posted it without thinking much about it. Then she'd gone to make dinner for Lily, helping her with homework and trying to act normal despite the knot of hurt still sitting heavy in her chest. Now, 3 hours later, her innocent post had over 500 comments, 327 shares, and was spreading across other community groups in neighboring towns. Jessica scrolled through the comments with growing amazement. "Are you serious? What year is this? My cousin got married at Willow Creek Gardens last summer. They had a cancellation for September. Message me and I'll connect you. I'm a photographer and would love to offer you a discount package. This is not what our community stands for. Hope Community has always been stuck in the dark ages. My friend who's divorced wasn't allowed to be a Sunday school teacher there. Pastor Richards refused to baptize my grandson because my daughter isn't married. Sending you love, honey." There were a few comments defending the church's right to uphold their values, but they were quickly overwhelmed by the outpouring of support. People Jessica had never met were offering help, sharing her story and expressing outrage on her behalf. "What are you looking at?" Michael asked softly, coming up behind her and placing his hands gently on her shoulders. Jessica tilted, her head back to look up at him. "My post in the community group, it kinda blew up." Michael leaned down to see the screen, his eyes widening as he scrolled through the comments. "Wow, this is a lot." "I didn't mean for this to happen," Jessica said, suddenly worried. "I just wanted venue suggestions. You didn't do anything wrong," Michael reassured her, pulling up a chair beside her. "You told the truth." As they sat there reading through the comments together, Jessica's phone began to ring. She didn't recognize the number but answered anyway. "Hello? Is this Jessica Wilson?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes, it is." "Hi, Jessica. This is Diane Rodriguez from Channel 8 News. We've seen your post about being denied a wedding venue because you're a single mother, and we'd be interested in talking to you about your experience. Would you be willing to share your, story on our evening broadcast tomorrow?" Jessica's mouth fell open. She covered the phone and whispered to Michael, "It's the local news station. They want to interview me." Michael raised his eyebrows in surprise. "What do you want to do?" Jessica thought for a moment. She hadn't asked for any of this attention, but maybe her story could help other single parents who had faced similar discrimination. "Ms. Rodriguez," she said into the phone, "I'd be open to talking about what happened, but I want to be clear that I'm not looking to attack anyone. I just want to find a new venue for our wedding." "Of course," the reporter assured her. "We're interested in the human story here. Could we come by tomorrow around 10 a.m.? After arranging the details and ending the call, Jessica let out a long breath. "This is crazy. All I did was ask for venue suggestions." "Sometimes the simplest truths hit the hardest," Michael said, taking her hand. "People don't like seeing others treated unfairly." By the next morning, Jessica's post had been shared over 2,000 times. Her phone was buzzing constantly with notifications, messages from strangers offering support, and even a few wedding vendors offering their services at reduced rates or for free. The interview with Channel 8 went better than Jessica had expected. She simply told her story, how she'd been raising Lily alone since her ex-boyfriend left during her pregnancy, how she'd met Michael 2 years ago, and how they had been turned away from the church where his family had celebrated weddings for generations. "I'm not angry," she told the reporter, though that wasn't entirely true. "I'm just disappointed. I thought churches were supposed to be places of forgiveness and acceptance." Michael sat beside her during the interview, his hand steady on her back. "What happened yesterday doesn't change our plans to get married," he added. "It just changes where we'll do it." By evening, the story had made it to the regional news. Several more local venues had reached out offering their spaces, 3 photographers had volunteered their services, and a bakery had offered to make their wedding cake for free. The outpouring of community support was overwhelming. But not all. The attention was positive. Hope Community Church's social media pages were being flooded with negative comments. Their most recent Facebook post about an upcoming youth group event had over 300 comments, most of them critical of their treatment of Jessica. "I didn't want this to happen," Jessica said to Michael as they watched the evening news cover their story. "I never meant to cause trouble for the church." "You didn't cause anything," Michael insisted. "Their own policies did this. All you did was tell the truth." Shortly after the news segment aired, Pastor Richards issued a brief statement to the press. "Hope Community Church has established guidelines for ceremonies performed in our sanctuary. These guidelines reflect our commitment to traditional family values. We respect Ms. Wilson's right to marry, but maintain our right to uphold our religious principles. We wish her well in finding a venue that aligns with her personal circumstances." The statement only fueled more controversy. By the next day, Jessica had received messages from 3 other local churches explicitly inviting her and Michael to consider their venues for the wedding. "Pastor Richards called my mom," Michael told Jessica over breakfast 3 days after the original post. His parents had been surprisingly quiet about the whole situation, which had worried both of them. "What did he say?" Jessica asked, her stomach tightening. "He tried to explain their position and asked them to help calm the situation. Mom told him that she and Dad are looking for a new church." Michael smiled slightly. "She also told him that her future daughter-in-law and granddaughter deserve better than conditional acceptance." Tears welled in Jessica's eyes. Michael's parents had always been kind to her and Lily, but their clear stance of support still touched her deeply. As the week progressed, the controversy began to settle, but Jessica had gained something unexpected from the experience. A sense that she wasn't alone. For years, she'd carried the weight of judgment as a single mother, feeling like she had to work twice as hard to prove her worth. Now, strangers were standing up for her, sharing their own stories of facing similar discrimination, and reminding her that she had nothing to be ashamed of. "So," Michael said on Friday evening as they sat on the porch swing after Lily had gone to bed, "Riverside Gardens has offered us their venue for September 18th. It's actually prettier than the church, right on the water." Jessica leaned her head on his shoulder. "Who would have thought being rejected would lead to all this?" "Sometimes," Michael said, kissing the top of her head. "The wrong door closes so the right one can open." The doorbell rang just as Jessica was finishing the dinner dishes. It was Friday evening, almost 3 weeks since the church incident, and things were finally starting to feel normal again. The media attention had died down. They'd secured a beautiful venue at Riverside Gardens and wedding plans were back on track. "I'll get it," Lily called, racing to the front door with the boundless energy only a 6-year-old could maintain at the end of the day. "Wait, honey," Jessica called after her, quickly drying her hands. "Check who it is first." But Lily had already swung the door open. Jessica hurried into the living room to find her daughter staring up at a tall man with dark hair and familiar eyes. Jessica froze, the dish towel still clutched in her hands. "Thomas," she whispered, hardly believing what she was seeing. He looked different from the last time she'd seen him 6 years ago. His face was fuller, healthier. The constant restlessness that had always seemed to hover around him was gone. He wore a simple button-down shirt and jeans, his hands stuffed awkwardly in his pockets. "Hey, Jess," he said quietly. His eyes moved to Lily, who was looking between the 2 adults with confusion. "Is this—" Jessica quickly moved to her daughter's side, placing protective hands on her shoulders. "Lily, sweetie, can you please go to your room for a few minutes? I need to talk to this person." "Who is he, Mommy?" Lily asked, her curious eyes still fixed on the stranger. "Just someone I used to know. I'll explain later, okay? Go pick out a book for bedtime." Once Lily was safely upstairs, Jessica stepped onto the porch, pulling the door nearly closed behind her. She crossed her arms over her chest, her heart hammering. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, keeping her voice low but unable to hide the tension. Thomas shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "I saw you on the news. The story about the church not letting you get married because you're a single mom." Jessica stared at him in disbelief. "And now, after 6 years of nothing, you just show up at my door? No call, no warning?" "I know. I should have called first. He trailed off, then seemed to gather himself. I've been sober for 3 years now. I'm working construction, have my own apartment. I've been trying to get my life together. Good for you, Jessica said, flatly, but that doesn't explain why you're here. Thomas looked down at his feet. When I saw that story, it hit me hard. You being judged for something that was my fault too. More my fault, really, since I'm the one who left. It wasn't just that you left, Thomas. It's that you never came back. Never called. Never sent a birthday card or child support or even asked how your daughter was doing. I know, he said quietly. I was a mess back then. The drugs, the drinking. I convinced myself you and the baby were better off without me. And then the longer I stayed away, the harder it seemed to come back. He paused. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Jess. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. And maybe get to know my daughter if you'll let me. Jessica let out a disbelieving laugh. You think it's that simple? You can't just walk in and out of a child's life whenever it's convenient for you. I know it's not simple, Thomas said. I know I've got a lot to prove, but I'm not the same person I was 6 years ago. I've been working my 12 steps, making amends where I can. I understand if you don't want me in your life, but Lily deserves to know her father. Jessica was about to respond when she heard the crunch of tires on the driveway. Michael's car pulled in, and she felt a rush of relief. He would know how to handle this situation better than she could right now. Michael approached cautiously, his eyes moving between Jessica and the stranger on the porch. Everything okay here? He asked, coming to stand beside Jessica. Michael, this is Thomas, Jessica said, watching understanding dawn in his eyes. Lily's father. To his credit, Michael didn't show any outward sign of shock. He simply extended his hand. I've heard about you. Thomas shook Michael's hand. I saw the news story about the church. An awkward silence fell over the three of them. Finally, Jessica sighed. You should probably come in. We can talk inside. The conversation that followed was one of the strangest of Jessica's life. Sitting in her living room with her ex and her fiancé, discussing the possibility of Thomas having a relationship with Lily. Michael was surprisingly open to the idea, pointing out that having more people who loved Lily could only be good for her. If you're serious about being in her life, you need to be consistent, Jessica insisted. No disappearing again when things get tough. No making promises you can't keep. Thomas nodded solemnly. I understand. I want to do this right. They agreed to start slowly. Thomas would meet Lily properly on the weekend with both Jessica and Michael present. They wouldn't tell her he was her father right away. Just a friend of her mom's who wanted to get to know her. If things went well and Thomas proved reliable, they would gradually explain the truth. Over the next few weeks, Thomas kept his word. He showed up on time for every scheduled visit, brought age-appropriate gifts for Lily, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know her. He asked about her school, her favorite books, her friends. He sat patiently while she showed him her collection of rocks and explained the elaborate backstory of each one. To Jessica's surprise, Lily took to Thomas immediately. There was something in the way they both crinkled their eyes when they laughed that made their connection obvious, at least to Jessica. It was both heartwarming and painful to watch them together, to see glimpses of what might have been if Thomas had made different choices years ago. Michael, for his part, showed no signs of jealousy or resentment. He's her biological father, he said when Jessica asked him about it one night. Nothing changes the fact that I'm going to be her dad in all the ways that matter. A month after Thomas's unexpected return, they finally told Lily the truth. They sat her down together, Jessica, Michael, and Thomas, and explained in simple terms that Thomas was her biological father, that he had been away for a long time but wanted to be part of her life now. Lily considered this information with the straightforward logic of a child. So I have two dads now, like my friend Zoe? Something like that, Jessica said cautiously. Michael will be your dad when we get married. Thomas is also your dad in a different way. Lily nodded, apparently satisfied with this arrangement. Can I show Thomas my new bike now? As the adults watched Lily proudly demonstrating her bike riding skills in the driveway, Jessica felt a complex mix of emotions. There was still anger at Thomas for the years of absence, concern about whether he would truly remain consistent, but also a tentative hope that this might somehow work out for Lily's benefit. What none of them expected was the direction Thomas's life would take in the coming weeks. "I've been thinking about getting back to church," he mentioned casually during one of his visits. "It was important to my family when I was growing up. Might help me stay on the right path." Jessica nodded, absently, not thinking much of it. "There are plenty of good churches around here." Thomas cleared his throat. "Actually, I was thinking about Hope Community. It's where my parents used to take me as a kid." Jessica's head snapped up. "Hope Community? The same church that refused to marry Michael and me because I'm a single mother?" "I know it's awkward," Thomas admitted, "but it feels familiar, and maybe it would be good for them to see the other side of the story. The father who abandoned his responsibilities showing up to make things right." Jessica didn't know what to say. The idea of Thomas attending the very church that had judged her so harshly felt like a betrayal, but she had no right to tell him where he could or couldn't worship. "Just don't mention your connection to me," she finally said. "I don't want to stir up that whole controversy again." Thomas agreed easily. What Jessica didn't realize then was how this small decision would set in motion a chain of events that would turn her life upside down once more. Over the next 2 months, Jessica watched with mixed feelings as Thomas became increasingly involved with Hope Community Church. What had started as occasional Sunday attendance quickly evolved into regular participation in their community outreach programs. He volunteered at their food bank, helped with their youth group activities, and even joined their men's Bible study. "He seems to be really finding his place there," Michael observed one evening as they reviewed wedding plans at the kitchen table. Their ceremony at Riverside Gardens was now just 6 weeks away. Jessica frowned, tapping her pen against her notepad. "I still don't understand it. How can he feel comfortable in a place that judged us so harshly? It feels like he's choosing their side somehow." Michael reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Maybe it's not about sides. Maybe he's genuinely reconnecting with his faith. At that specific church, though, out of all the churches in town," Jessica sighed. "I know I shouldn't care. It's his life. It's just weird." What Jessica didn't say out loud was how it stung to see Thomas being welcomed with open arms by the same community that had rejected her. No one there seemed to care that he was an absent father who had abandoned his pregnant girlfriend. Somehow, that sin was more forgivable than hers, the sin of raising her child alone. The following Sunday, Thomas picked up Lily for their now regular father-daughter afternoon. They usually went to the park or the movies, sometimes for ice cream or to the children's museum. Today, though, Thomas had asked if he could take Lily to the church picnic. "Are you sure that's a good idea?" Jessica had asked when he first brought it up. "What if someone recognizes her as my daughter?" "No one will make the connection," Thomas had assured her. "Besides, it's just a picnic. Games and food and face painting. Nothing religious." Jessica had reluctantly agreed, more for Lily's sake than anything else. Her daughter had been thriving with Thomas's attention, and Jessica didn't want to do anything to jeopardize their developing relationship. When Thomas brought Lily home that evening, her face painted like a butterfly and clutching a balloon animal, Jessica knew immediately that something was different. Thomas had an odd energy about him, a nervous excitement that made her instantly suspicious. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" he asked after Lily had run inside to show Michael her balloon. "Dog." They sat on the front porch steps, the summer evening warm around them. Thomas fidgeted with his keys, clearly working up to something. "I met someone," he finally said. Jessica raised her eyebrows. "Okay." "Her name is Melanie. She's Pastor Richard's daughter." Jessica felt like someone had dumped ice water down her back. "Pastor Richards? The same Pastor Richards who refused to marry Michael and me?" Thomas nodded, having the grace to look at least somewhat uncomfortable. "I know it's awkward, but Jess, she's amazing. She works with kids with special needs. She's kind and funny and—" "How long?" Jessica interrupted, her voice flat. "We've been talking for about 3 weeks, but it feels like I've known her forever." Jessica stared at him, speechless. Of all the women in all the world, Thomas had to fall for the daughter of the man who had humiliated her? Does she know about me, about Lily? Jessica finally asked. Yes, Thomas admitted. I told her everything. About my past, the drugs, leaving you pregnant. She believes in second chances. How generous of her, Jessica said, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. And what does her father think about her dating a recovered addict with a child born out of wedlock? Thomas looked down at his hands. He was hesitant at first, but he says my journey back to faith is inspiring. A prodigal son story. Jessica laughed, but there was no humor in it. Wow. So you abandoned your child for 6 years, and you're the inspiring prodigal son. I raised that child alone, and I'm too sinful to get married in their church. That's quite a double standard. It's not like that, Thomas said, but his defense sounded weak even to his own ears. It's complicated. No, it's actually very simple, Jessica said, standing up. It's hypocrisy, plain and simple. Over the next few weeks, Jessica tried to put Thomas's new relationship out of her mind. She had a wedding to plan, a daughter to raise, and a job to do. She didn't have time to worry about her ex-boyfriend's love life, even if it did make her blood boil every time she thought about it. But then came the bombshell. Thomas arrived to pick up Lily one Saturday morning, practically bouncing with excitement. Jessica knew before he even spoke that something big had happened. Melanie and I are engaged, he announced as soon as Lily was out of earshot, getting her backpack from her room. Jessica stared at him. Engaged? You've known her for what? 2 months? When you know, Thomas said with a shrug and a smile that made Jessica want to throw something at him. We're getting married in November at Hope Community. November? As in 4 months from now? That's... Jessica struggled to find words that weren't completely inappropriate with her daughter potentially in earshot. That's very fast. We don't want to wait, Thomas said, as if it were the most reasonable thing in the world. And Pastor Richards is thrilled. He's going to perform the ceremony himself. The irony was almost too much to bear. Pastor Richards, who had refused to marry Jessica because she was a single mother, was now eagerly planning to marry the man who had made her a single mother in the first place. When Lily came bounding down the stairs, Jessica forced a smile onto her face. Have fun with your dad today, sweetie. After they left, Jessica sank onto the couch, her mind spinning. Michael found her there 10 minutes later, still staring into space. What's wrong? He asked, sitting beside her. Jessica told him about Thomas's engagement and the planned wedding at Hope Community. To her surprise, Michael didn't seem shocked. I had a feeling something like this might happen, he said. The way Thomas talked about the church last time I saw him, he seemed to be really embracing their whole worldview. It's not fair, Jessica said, her voice cracking slightly. Why does he get a fresh start, a clean slate, while I'm still being judged for a choice we both made? Why am I the one who carries all the shame? Michael pulled her close. You have nothing to be ashamed of. You've been an amazing mother to Lily. Anyone who can't see that isn't worth your time. But it wasn't that simple. Over the next few weeks, the situation grew even more complicated. Thomas started bringing Melanie along to some of his visits, with Lily. Jessica had to admit, grudgingly, that Melanie seemed genuinely kind and good with Lily. She was pretty in a wholesome way, with long brown hair and a smile that lit up her whole face. Melanie's really nice, Mommy, Lily reported after one such visit. She helped me make a special bracelet, and she said after she marries Daddy Thomas, I can call her whatever I want. Even just Melanie is okay. Jessica tried to be happy for her daughter. Having more people who loved Lily could only be a good thing, as Michael often reminded her. But every time Thomas mentioned wedding plans, every time Melanie showed up with that glowing smile and perfect manners, Jessica felt a twist of something ugly in her stomach. The final straw came when Thomas asked if Lily could be the flower girl in his wedding. You can't be serious, Jessica said when he brought it up during a drop-off. You want our daughter to participate in a ceremony at the same church that rejected me? It's not about you, Jess, Thomas said, his voice taking on an edge she hadn't heard since his return. It's about Lily being part of a special day for her father. The father who was missing for the first 6 years of her life, Jessica reminded him. Thomas's face hardened. I thought we were moving past that. I thought you had forgiven me. Forgiven you. Maybe. Forgotten? Never. Jessica crossed her arms. I need to think about it. This isn't a simple yes or no. That night, after Lily was asleep, Jessica and Michael had a long, difficult conversation. Michael, ever the voice of reason, pointed out that forbidding Lily to participate might create unnecessary tension in their co-parenting relationship with Thomas. Is it worth damaging that relationship just to make a point? He asked gently. I know it's not fair. I know it hurts. But maybe we need to think about what's best for Lily here. Jessica knew he was right, even though every part of her wanted to refuse out of principle. In the end, she agreed that Lily could be the flower girl, but with conditions. Jessica would help her get ready, they would drive her to the church themselves, and they would pick her up immediately after the ceremony, skipping the reception. It was a compromise that left no one completely satisfied, but it was the best they could do under the circumstances. As Thomas and Melanie's wedding day approached, Jessica couldn't shake the feeling that something in her life had gone terribly wrong. In just a few weeks, the man who had abandoned her and their unborn child would be getting married in the very church that had deemed her unworthy, and there was nothing she could do about it except watch it happen. The morning of Thomas and Melanie's wedding dawned with unfairly perfect weather, clear blue skies, gentle sunshine, and just enough breeze to rustle the autumn leaves without messing up anyone's hair. Jessica stood at her bedroom window, coffee, mug in hand, watching the play of light through the trees and trying to quiet the storm of emotions inside her. You don't have to go, you know, Michael said softly from the doorway. I can take Lily by myself. Jessica turned and gave him a small smile. No, I need to be there for her. Besides, if I don't show up, it'll just make me look bitter. You're allowed to feel however you feel about this, Michael reminded her. No one would blame you for being upset. But Jessica shook her head. I'm not giving anyone the satisfaction of seeing me bothered by this, especially not Pastor Richards. The truth was more complicated, of course. Part of her wanted to skip the whole thing, to pretend it wasn't happening. But another part felt compelled to witness it, to see with her own eyes the church that had rejected her welcome Thomas with open arms. Lily burst into the room then, a whirlwind of excitement in her flower girl dress. Mommy, look. Doesn't it twirl so pretty? She spun around, the pale pink skirt floating around her like a cloud. Jessica's heart squeezed at the sight of her daughter so happy and innocent, blissfully unaware of the complicated adult emotions swirling around this day. You look beautiful, sweetheart, she said, setting down her coffee to kneel beside Lily. Like a princess. Daddy Thomas said I get to throw real flower petals. And Melanie has a special bracelet for me to wear that matches hers. Jessica nodded, forcing brightness into her voice. That sounds wonderful. Are you ready to go get your hair done? As Jessica helped Lily get ready, carefully curling her hair and pinning it with tiny flowers, she allowed herself to sink into the simple joy of mothering. Whatever else was happening today, whatever complicated feelings she had about Thomas and the church, her daughter's happiness remained the most important thing. They arrived at Hope Community Church an hour before the ceremony was set to begin. Jessica had insisted on helping Lily get ready, rather than dropping her off to get ready with the bridal party. It was a small act of control in a situation where she felt she had very little. The church looked exactly as Jessica remembered it, from her disappointing meeting with Pastor Richards months ago. The white steeple reaching toward the sky, the neatly maintained gardens, the stained glass windows catching the sunlight. It looked so welcoming from the outside. No one would guess at the judgment that could lie within its walls. Jessica, Michael, and Lily made their way to the side entrance where they had been told the wedding party was gathering. They found Thomas pacing nervously in a small waiting room already dressed in his tuxedo. You made it, he said, relief evident in his voice. His eyes fixed on Lily, and his entire face softened. Look at you, princess. You're the most beautiful flower girl ever. Lily ran to him and he knelt to give her a hug. Over Lily's shoulder, his eyes met Jessica's. Thank you for bringing her, he said quietly. It means a lot to me. Jessica nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She was saved from having to respond by the arrival of Melanie's mother, who swept in to collect Lily for final instructions about her flower girl duties. "We'll be in the sanctuary," Michael told Thomas. "Good luck." As they walked away, Jessica couldn't help but notice the easy way Thomas fit into this place, the way people greeted him warmly as they passed. No one looked at him like he was lesser, damaged, or unworthy. No one seemed to care about his past mistakes. The sanctuary was already half full when they found seats near the back. Jessica recognized a few faces from the community, people who had supported her after her own rejection from this very church. They looked awkward when they spotted her, clearly surprised to see her there. "This is surreal," she whispered to Michael. "I feel like I'm in some weird alternate universe." "We're just here for Lily," he reminded her, squeezing her hand. "1 hour, and then we can leave." The ceremony began with traditional music. Jessica watched with a strange detachment as the bridesmaids processed down the aisle. Then came Lily, her face a picture of concentration as she carefully dropped rose petals along the aisle. Jessica's heart swelled with pride despite everything. And then Melanie appeared on her father's arm. Pastor Richards beamed as he escorted his daughter down the aisle, his chest puffed out with pride. Jessica had to admit that Melanie looked beautiful in her white gown, her face radiant with happiness. As Pastor Richards began the ceremony, his words about the sanctity of marriage and God's plan for families washed over Jessica like salt in a wound. The same man who had deemed her unworthy to be married in this church was now officiating Thomas's wedding, with flowery speeches about love and forgiveness. "Today we celebrate not just the union of Thomas and Melanie," Pastor Richards proclaimed, "but also God's amazing grace and the power of redemption. Thomas's journey back to faith reminds us that no one is beyond salvation." Jessica's fingernails dug into her palms. Michael placed a steadying hand on her knee, and she took a deep breath, reminding herself why she was there. The ceremony continued, and Jessica found her mind drifting to her own upcoming wedding. In just 3 weeks, she and Michael would be standing in front of their friends and family at Riverside Gardens, exchanging their own vows. Their ceremony wouldn't be in a traditional church, but it would be full of love and acceptance, the things that truly mattered. As Thomas and Melanie were pronounced husband and wife, Jessica felt an unexpected sense of release. Watching them walk back down the aisle together, Lily following behind with a junior groomsman, Jessica realized something important. This wasn't her story anymore. Thomas had chosen his path, and she had chosen hers. What Pastor Richards or anyone else thought of her didn't matter. After the ceremony, they collected Lily as planned. She was bubbling with excitement about the wedding and her important role in it. "Can't we stay for the party, Mommy? Please?" Lily begged. "Melanie said there's going to be chocolate cake and dancing." Jessica hesitated, looking at Michael. They had planned to leave immediately, but seeing Lily's enthusiasm made her reconsider. "What do you think?" she asked him quietly. "It's up to you," he said. "I'm okay either way." In that moment, Jessica made a decision. She knelt down to Lily's level. "Tell you what, we're not going to stay for their party because we have our own special day to plan, but how about we have our own celebration? We can go get ice cream sundaes with all the toppings you want and then maybe see a movie." Lily considered this for a moment, then nodded enthusiastically. "Can I keep wearing my pretty dress?" "Absolutely," Jessica laughed. "You can be a princess, all day." As they walked out of the church, Jessica felt lighter than she had in months. She didn't need validation from Pastor Richards or anyone else. She had built a beautiful life with her daughter and soon-to-be husband. She had a community of friends who had rallied around her when she needed support. Those were the things that mattered. 3 weeks later, Jessica stood at the edge of the garden at Riverside Gardens, a bouquet of wildflowers in her hands. The setting sun cast a golden glow over the assembled guests. Over 200 people, many of whom had become friends through the controversy. The lake sparkled behind the floral arch where Michael waited, looking handsome and a little nervous in his suit. Lily went first down the aisle, once again taking her flower girl duties very seriously. She wore a blue dress that she had picked out herself, her hair crowned with a circlet of tiny daisies. As the music changed and all the guests rose to their feet, Jessica took her first step toward Michael. This wasn't the wedding she had initially planned, but somehow it had become something more meaningful. Each person standing there represented someone who had chosen love and acceptance over judgment. The officiant, a kind-hearted woman from a neighboring church who had reached out after hearing Jessica's story, smiled warmly as Jessica reached the altar. "Friends and family," she began, her voice carrying clearly across the garden. "We are gathered here today not just to witness the union of Jessica and Michael, but to celebrate the power of true love and community. This couple has shown us what it means to stand strong in the face of adversity, to choose love over bitterness, and to build a family based on acceptance rather than judgment." Jessica looked out at the sea of supportive faces and then back at Michael, who was gazing at her with such love it made her heart ache. Lily stood beside them, practically bouncing with excitement. This was her family. Not perfect, not traditional, but real and loving and strong. As they exchanged their vows, Jessica felt a profound sense of peace. Life hadn't gone according to plan. It rarely did for anyone. But she had found her way to where she was meant to be all along. And that was a far greater blessing than any church's approval could ever be.